Hey, good people, how you doing? David Taub here, co-creator of NextLevelGuitar.com. What's up? Hope all is well, and I hope your guitar journeys are going famously. I want to do a very comprehensive video. This one's going to encompass lots of topics when we're talking about how to go about purchasing a guitar amp. So we're going to go very in-depth in this, and hopefully you will find this inspiring and maybe learn a few things that will hopefully make your amp purchase a little bit easier, because it's a big deal, man. Your amp is the amp that you choose is a big part of your sound, so it's pretty important. Pretty important. So it's tantamount that you are armed with the proper information. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by talking about just some broad things when it comes to amplifiers and sound, and then we're going to get into the heart of the matter. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty, where I'm going to talk about all the different things that you want to be aware of and what separates the different amps and why, and what to look for, and I'll even make some suggestions for some amps and things like that. But I think it's important first to start with a few broad topics when talking about what to look for in a guitar amp, when purchasing an amp, when trying to choose an amp, different amps. There's just so much stuff out there now. It's unbelievable. We live in such an exciting time, my friends, where there are so many choices available to us, so many great choices, and the technology just keeps getting better and better and better. And there's more and more manufacturers out there that are putting out great products that are just awesome sounding with killer features. It's a lot out there, so it's exciting, but at the same time it can be overwhelming, right? Because there's so many choices and so many different models, and it's impossible to play all the different ones at one or two or even three music stores, because music stores only carry a finite amount of manufacturers' amps, and you're not going to find everything in one amp store, right? So it's challenging, as well as there's just so much information out there and so many people doing reviews of different gear, like on YouTube. You could sit there literally. If there's any math majors out there, it'd be interesting to figure out, like, if you were to sit there and watch every possible video, on amps, like how many years or decades would that be that you could be literally sitting watching amp videos or sound videos or tone videos? Just an absolute, almost an infinite amount of time, right, that you could spend. So you have to be careful you don't fall into that trap of just spending too much time, watching videos. And you know what I always say, you do your research, you do your homework, but make a well-informed decision and then pull the trigger. You know what I'm saying, right? You got to make that decision and don't overanalyze. Some broad things I want to talk about amp purchasing and amps first. The first thing is, buy the best you can afford. You really get what you pay for. And quality and craftsmanship is important in amps, especially if you're gigging out a lot. The amp is going to take a beating from transporting it and from playing it and cranking it up and moving it in rehearsals and whatnot. So you get what you pay for, like, with most things in life. So buy the best you can afford. Another broad thing is, if you want a specific brand, get that brand. If you have to wait to save up for it, do it. What I mean by that is, if you really want a Marshall, if you love that Marshall tone, you really want a Marshall, get a Marshall. Don't go don't go out and get an amp that sounds like a Marshall, that's modeled after a Marshall. If that's what you really want, save up the little bit, extra bit, and get what you really want. Because in the end, if you get something that sounds like something else that's modeled after, you may not be happy. I always think if that's what you really want, get it. You deserve it, right? Our amp purchase is going to bring us years, decades, maybe a lifetime of joy that we're going to be using this. And if you're a working musician and you're making money, it's going to pay for itself. So it's important to make the right decision, spend the extra money, buy quality, and also, if that's what you want, get it. You deserve it. You work hard. Go for it. And I'm going to talk about not just expensive boutique amps in this lesson. We'll hit on the beginner amps too, the cheaper bedroom practice amps. All amps are not created equal. And what works for one person in their situation totally won't work for another person in their situation. They're all different. They all have different features that we're going to talk about, different tones for different playing applications, different types of music and genres tend to steer toward one amp. So they're not all created equal. And it's a very personal decision too, what one person loves, another person may not love. And, so when we talk about tone, we talk about amp sounds, it's very subjective. So I can't say this amp is better than this amp is better than this amp, because they all have positive features. And, it's a very subjective thing. So you have to find out through your research and diligence and listening what sounds best to your ears, right? That's very important. Tone is subjective, and a large part of your tone really comes from what's in your hands and what's in your heart. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Eddie Van Halen can plug into any amp, use any guitar, and he's going to sound like Eddie Van Halen. You are not going to plug into an Eddie Van Halen amplifier and plug in and all of a sudden sound like Eddie Van Halen per se, right? A lot of it is in your hands and in your heart. Now, you can get close, certainly, get in the ballpark using certain gear, but just be careful of that. You just don't necessarily want to buy a signature sounding amp because that's the exact tone you want of your favorite player, and then you get disappointed when you plug into it and you sound like you, right? So remember, get close, do your due diligence. Tone, a lot of times, a lot of tone is really how you're how you're attacking the instrument, how you're hitting the strings, how you're bending the notes, your technique, and a lot of that goes into your tone. It's subjective for the most part, and I say for the most part because there are certain things that are just inarguable. I mean, who's going to argue that David Gilmour, David Gilmour has great tone? There's no doubt about it. I don't think anyone could say, "Oh man, that guy's tone sucks," right? Great tone. Some guys, just Stevie Ray Vaughan, great tone, right? No matter what they play through. Gary Moore, great tone, right? So we're chasing after it. We kind of have that in our mind, what we want. How do we go about getting it, right? The other thing I wanted to mention before we get into the specifics of what to look for and how to funnel your choices down to make it a little bit easier is I'm a firm believer in supporting your local communities and, try to make your purchases in your local community, especially from mom and pop music stores if you can. Or a local music store. That's a big deal. I think we're getting in this age of, cyberspace and the age of technology, and it's very easy just to go to a store, play something, okay, that's what I want, then go online and make the purchase to save a couple dollars. I can understand that. We're all budget conscious, but the mom and pop music store is really disappearing, and it's a shame. And so I just want to say, if you can, I think it's important that we support our local communities, that we get out there and we spend money in our local communities and not necessarily always just everything from just making purchases online. Just keep that in mind. The most important thing is, if you're overwhelmed or if you really don't know where to begin, is you have to funnel your choices down and look at a certain area of amplifier or a certain model of amplifier within a range. You can't look at everything because, like I said, amps are not created equal, and a lot of it depends on the application you want, and a lot of it depends on these other things that I'm going to talk about. And I've been getting a lot of emails, questions about that, and that's why I wanted to do a long lesson, very comprehensive on amplifier purchasing, kind of everything you've always wanted to know about amps, but we're afraid to ask. But who can say everything, right? Or a lot of things, right? Okay. So a big thing is, let's funnel our choices down. And basically, I think you could funnel your choices down by looking at 6 different topics. 6 things, and we'll talk about them individually. But funnel your choices down by these 6. Function, budget, the type of amp, the features you want, that's 4, your tonal preferences, 5, and the type of music you play, right? So let's hit the easy ones first. Budget. Obviously, if you have a $300 budget, you don't want to go looking at $3,000 amps, right? Your budget right off the bat is going to narrow down the amount of choices that you're going to have for an amplifier. So have a budget in mind and stay within that budget. Don't start playing hugely expensive amps if you can't afford it, because it's just going to lead to an impulse purchase. The type of music you play, that's another easy one. Obviously, certain amplifiers are more geared toward playing certain styles of music. If you're, in a metal band, you may not want to get, a Roland Jazz chorus amp, or, a very clean Fender amp. A lot of metal guys, especially in today's modern metal player, they prefer things like, the Axe Effects, or they prefer things like a Mesa Boogie triple rectifier, or an EVH amp, right? Or whatnot, or a diesel. Those are very high gain amps, and those have the sounds and the features that particular genre of music really kind of puts you in that tonal ballpark. Now, that's not to say that you can't use any amp for any playing, because you can. There's really no rules. It all depends on what sounds best to your ears. But again, that could point you in the right direction. If you prefer the clean sounds, you might want to start looking at really clean sounding amps that take pedals well, because you can always add pedals, right? Choices for that would be like a nice Fender DeVille amp. That's some of my favorite sounding clean sounds. Some of the Fender amplifiers, and I'm talking tube amps, have that clean sound. If you like a more Voxy type British sound, like a Vox makes very nice clean sounding amps, which also distort well. Matchless has a really good Voxy kind of clean sound. I like the clean sound of my Mesa Boogie Mark II. Mesa Boogie has really great clean as well as distorted. So again, you want to look at the style of music you're playing, and that's going to help you funnel down the choices. Third thing is function. This is very important. What do you need the amp for? Do you need it for practicing in your bedroom at low volume?